Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. The Gauteng Muslim Shura Council invites you to a Back to Basics series, a commentary on the poem Nadhm al-Akhdari, a Maliki Fiqh masterpiece by Sīdī Abdulqādir Mandla Nkosi. Session 9.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Hamdan yuwafi ni'amahu wa yukafi'u mazidah. اللهم صل وسلم بجميع الشؤون في الظهور والبطون على من منه شقت الأسرار وانفلقت الأنوار نبينا وحبيبنا محمد سيد الأبرار وعلى آله الأخيار وأصحابه والتابعين ومن تلا الأثار. سبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا الكتاب والحكمة وانفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. In our previous session, we discussed fara'idul wudu, the obligatory elements of wudu, and we said there's no wudu without these, meaning if a person leaves out one of them, it is as if he has not performed wudu. Now today we're going to go through the sunnah acts of wudu, and we said a sunnah act is an act that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do on a regular basis, but there's absolutely nothing that indicates or legislates it as an obligation. Beyond any doubt, the sunnah is very important as it is the second source of Islamic law. And it beautifully complements the Quran, of course, if understood well and implemented in its proper context. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. There has certainly been for you in the Messenger of Allah an excellent example. Now the ayah is read in two ways. Uswa, which is the riwayah of Imam Asim, hence Shu'ba and Hafs, the common reading styles. However, the rest of the Qurra read it Iswa. The meaning remains the same, but there's a minor refined difference. Uswatun Hasana is the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam being an excellent example outwardly with his af'al, his actions. And Iswa is him sallallahu alaihi wasallam being an excellent example internally, his ahwal, his states and his inward purity. Both these conditions are sunnah, worthy of following, even though the masses have been made to believe or to limit the sunnah to looks and things like that. وَمَا أَتَيْكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَيْكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whatever the messenger gives you, take it, and whatever he forbids you from doing, stay far away from it. Wattaqullah. Allah follows up the instruction with taqwa, and the wise can read between the lines. Al-Mu'mineen Aisha radiyallahu anha was once asked about the behavior of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and she said, "Kana khuluquhu al-Quran," that his character was that of the Quran. Now, some people use the terms hadith and sunnah interchangeably, but not in the way of Imam Malik radiallahu anhu. Sunnah is usually understood as the things that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, approved and disapproved of, whether explicitly or indirectly. And as for hadith, it is usually the reports of such accounts. Certainly, the hadith literature is highly instrumental as a source of sunnah, but it's not the only source. What is somewhat unique to the Maliki school is that Imam Malik radiallahu anhu considered the consensus and the actions of Ahl al-Medina, the people of Medina, as a source of sunnah. And by people, he meant the ulama of Medina. And of course, this is one of the principles of the Maliki schools that some imams from other garrison cities had a major problem with. Nonetheless, that's advanced usul. For us, back to the basics. قال النظم شيخ عبد الله بن أحمد رحمه الله ونفعنا الله به وبكم آمين. Our poet Sheikh Abdullah ibn Ahmad may Allah have mercy on him and benefit us by him and by you, says, وَفِي الشُّرُوعِ غَسْلُ الْيَدَيْنِ سُنَّةٌ لِلْكُوعِ. Beginning by washing their hands to the wrist bone is a sunnah. And most of the books, they say غَسْلُ الْيَدَيْنِ, washing their hands, قَبْلَ إِدْخَالِهِمَا فِي الْإِنَاءِ, before dipping them into the vessel or the container. The best practice is to make wudu from a small bucket or container instead of water taps. So the first sunnah is to wash your hands to the wrist bone by lifting the bucket with your left hand and pouring the water onto your right hand before dipping your hand in and scooping. You do not dip your hand into the water vessel until you have washed your hands completely. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam said, إذا استيقظ أحدكم من نومه فليغسل يداه قبل أن يدخلها في الوضوء. When one of you wakes up, let him wash his hand before he dips it into his water. فإن أحدكم لا يدري أين تابت يداه. For indeed you do not know where your hand was while you were sleeping, and you know what that means. Now the second sunnah is madmada, rinsing the mouth, using your hand to scoop water and putting it into your mouth, rinsing thoroughly by shaking water side to side and all. And the third and the fourth sunnahs are mustanshaq wal mustanthar, slightly inhaling water into your nostrils and exhaling. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam said, إِذَا تَوَضَّأَ أَحَدُكُمْ فَلْيَجْعَلْ فِي أَنْفِهِ مَاءً. When one of you is making wudu, let him put some water into his nostrils. ثُمَّ لِيَنْتَثِرْ, and let him blow it out, exhale. Now the fifth sunnah act is وَرَدُّ مَسْحِ الرَّأْسِ, returning the wiping of the head to where one began. Remember, the obligation is to wipe the head, preferably from the front to the back. And now, the sunnah is to return the wipe to where one began. And the poet says, وَمَسْحُ الْأُذْنَيْنِ. The sixth sunnah is wiping the ears. That is wiping, not washing, but wiping the external part of the ears, back and front, and the inside pathways with your fingers. Ibn Abbas reported that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam masa ra'asa wa udhnayn zahirihima wa batinihima, that he would wipe his head, and when it came to the ear he would wipe the apparent, the external and the insides. And the seventh sunnah is wa tajdidul ma', renewing the water for wiping the ears is a separate sunnah. Meaning, instead of wiping your ears with the same wet hands you use to wipe your head, you renew the water especially for wiping the ears. And this is a separate sunnah. Do not confuse the two. Wiping the ears is a sunnah, and renewing the water for wiping the ears is another separate sunnah. Abdullah ibn Zayd, describing the wudu of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, said, إنه يعني رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم مسح أذنين بما غير الذي مسح به الرأس. That Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he would wipe his ears with different water than that which he used to wipe his head. And the eighth sunnah, which is the last one, is tartibul furud, maintaining the sequence of the obligatory acts as they flow in the Quran, meaning that you'll have to wash your face before you wash your hands, and you'll have to wipe your head before you wash your feet. There is a weaker view in the madhab that it is actually obligatory to maintain the order as revealed in the Quran, but it is merely considered a sunnah according to the dominant view in the madhab. Now moving right along, Tudarikul Masyi min A'da'il Wudu, the next chapter, if one forgets a limb of wudu. وَذَاكِرٌ مِنَ الْوُدُوءِ فَرْضًا عَلَى قُرْبٍ أَتَى بِفِعْلِهِ وَمَا تَلَا. He who remembers a missed obligation while still near the ablution area, he should wash that limb and whatever follows sequential. So if you forget to wash your face, for example, meaning you wash your hands, you rinsed your mouth and cleaned your nose, and forgot to wash the face, and you washed your hands and so forth, and you're still within or near the place of wudu. And what is meant by being near the place of wudu is that your limbs are still wet. What do you do in this situation? You return and you wash the limb that you forgot, the face in this case, and thereafter you'll have to wash all the limbs that follow in the sequence, even though you washed them before. Yes, you repeat it again. This is mainly to maintain the reward of fulfilling a sunnah, which is doing the obligatory limbs in sequence. وَإِنْ يَطُولْ فَعَلَهُ قَدْ. And if it is a long while later, you only do the limb that you forgot. Now, if you only remember after a long while, meaning the limbs have completely dried, in this case, you'll only have to wash the limb that you forgot and not worry about the sequence at all, because you've already missed out on the reward of tartib, the sequence, because your limbs have completely dried. So you just have to wash what you forgot, and that's it. And this is by no way a contradiction of what we mentioned previously. Remember, we said if you stop or your wudu is interrupted due to something that you need to attend to, and if your limbs dry, then you have to start afresh. Remember that? And now we are saying if you miss limb, meaning you forgot to wash it, and it eventually dries, then you are allowed to wash only that limb. The difference between the two cases is that the latter scenario, it was due to forgetfulness, whereas in the first case, you stopped deliberately attending to whatever it is that you are attending to. And our poet reminds us this when he says, وَابْتَدَى وُضُوءَهُ بِالطُّولِ إِن تَعَمَّدَ. He begins his wudu afresh if he deliberately paused it. And if he deliberately left out a limb for too long, then he will have to start all over again. And this goes back to the hukum, the ruling of the dryness of the previous limb. In kana salla batalat. And if he has already prayed with it, meaning that deficient wudu, that prayer is invalid. If he remembers a missed obligation of wudu, such as washing the face and hands, or wiping the head, or washing the feet, after he has already prayed, that prayer is invalid. He will have to go back and make wudu afresh and repeat his prayer. وَيَفْعَلُ سُنَّنَهُ فَقَطْ لِمَا يُسْتَقْبَلُ. And he mends or rectifies the sunnah acts of wudu merely for the forthcoming prayers. Now in this case, if the forgotten act is merely a sunnah, like a person who forgot to rinse his mouth or sniff water into his nostrils, for example, then he only washes and rectifies that sunnah act, and he does not have to do anything after it. This is simply to complete or to perfect your wudu for the subsequent prayers, and you do not have to repeat the prayers you prayed with that deficient wudu. وَغَافِلٌ عَنْ لُعْمَةٍ فَعَلَهَا. And if one misses a portion of a limb, he washes it. كَعُدْوِهَا فَهِيَ تُسَاوِي أَصْلَهَا. With an intention for that limb, just as he was going to do it initially. وَذَاكِرٌ سُنَّةٍ بَعْدَ أَنْ شَرَعْ فِي الْفَرْضِ مِنْ بَعْدِ تَمَامِهِ رَجَعْ. Whoever remembers a sunnah act after he has begun a compulsory act, he only returns to it after completing the wudu. Now get this right. If a person only remembers a sunnah act, for example, you have your intention and you begin washing your hands and you rinse your mouth, and instead of doing your nose, you forget and you skip and you wash your face. Now, while washing your face, you remember that you did not inhale or exhale water up your nostrils. What do you do now? You do not return to that act, the nose, immediately when you remember. You carry on washing your face and you proceed with the rest of your wudu. And when you are finished, only then do you go back to your nose. The principle is that you do not stop or interrupt a fard, a mandatory act, because of a sunnah. This is an important qaida, fiqh principle, that a fard always takes precedence. Naam, we stop here. These are the sunnah acts of wudu by which a person perfects his wudu. However, as we said, the wudu remains valid if any of the above mentioned acts are forgotten or left out due to lack or insufficient amount of water. Now, we'll continue in our next session with the Fada'il al-Wudu, the meritorious acts of wudu. Allahumma inna nas'aluka imanan da'ima wa nas'aluka qalban khashi'a wa nas'aluka ilman nafi'a wa nas'aluka yaqinan sadiqa wa nas'aluka dinan qayyima wa nas'aluka al-'afiyya min kulli baliyya wa nas'aluka tamam al-'afiyya wa nas'aluka dawam al-'afiyya wa nas'aluka ash-shukra 'ala al-'afiyya wa nas'aluka ghina 'anil nas. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik 'ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa 'ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.